everyone, welcome back to Diversity Learning Lab. Today's lecture is on Neo-Realism or Structural Realism. There is another video on Classical Realism, so if you have not watched the video yet, go below into the description. There is link over there. Do check that lecture too. So before going to start Neo-Realism, I will give you a quick brief recap of the realistic school of thought. Realistic school of thought believe that the world is anarchic. By anarchic we mean that there is no higher authority to look over the states. There is no check and balance. So because of this, the absence of the authority raises security dilemma, which means that the states, they become insecure. They feel threats and they wanted to face their own threats. They have to solve their own issues, their own problems, their own conflicts, and they have to protect and secure themselves. So in order to provide security to their state, they seek power. Now there are two ways to gain power. So classical realism, or HANMORGENTHAU, who is a very prominent figure of classical realism, believed that all kinds of conflicts, all kinds of wars and power games, they were actually because of human nature. The classical realism believed that human nature is lusty, is power hunger, and is a source of all kinds of international conflicts. While later on, Kenneth Walls, he instead of human nature, he said that structure of international system, the structure of the system in which we are living, is actually responsible for international chaos, for international conflicts, and for wars. Kenneth Walls, he actually wrote a book, Theory of International Politics, in 1979, and in this book he provided us with the glimpses of Neo-Realism. He simply took the realism and detached it from its classical roots. Now the classical roots of the realism were that the human nature is after power. That's why states, they gain power. While he rejected these classical roots and said that it's the international structure of international system that is responsible for conflict, that is responsible for this power game. So this is a very brief definition of the Neo-Realism, which says that it's the structure or architecture of the international system that actually explains the behavior of a state. Now, structure or the architecture of the international system will mean that what other states are doing in the international arena, what big powers are doing in international system, what is the situation in the world, what kind of conflicts are going on. So a particular state respond according to all that situation. Neo-realism further argue that if there is a particular state, the institutions of that state, the diplomacy of that state, the politics that is present in that state, or the parties, or whatever is going on in that state, or the individual structure, or the human nature, they are totally irrelevant. They are not going to participate, or they are not going to explain the behavior of a particular state. So here Neo-Realism splits actually into two. One is defensive realism and the other one is offensive realism. Imagine yourself as a state and you are living very next to a very powerful state. So immediate neighbor is a powerful state. So it becomes very difficult for states to survive next to powerful state, because powerful states, the power of these powerful states give rise to security dilemma, and the states feel insecure, and in order to secure themselves, they attain power. Now there are two dimensions, there are two ways to gain power. Defensive realism suggests one way. So defensive realism says that a state should gain power, a state should develop power, but the sole purpose of that power should be to protect the state, to defend that state in the hour of need, so that they can protect themselves from threats. So this defensive realism is actually the Neo-Realism of Walls. Walls, when he presented Neo-Realism, he was actually talking about defensive realism. Later on, another very prominent figure, John Mearsheimer, he presented counter of defensive realism, that is actually offensive realism. Now, the survival is actually the basic national interest of any state. So, the quest of survival compels states to be as powerful as possible. Offensive realism suggests that the sole purpose of state to gain power is not survival. They gain power so that they can become most powerful state in the region, in the globe, so that they can become hegemon, they can become dominant. For example, in South Asia, India is gaining power in order to become dominant, not in order to protect its state. China is gaining power in Asia again for dominance, and US is already a very dominant state in Western Hemisphere, and not in only in Western Hemisphere but in the whole world. So, offensive realism says that power maximization is for the dominant status. States maximize their power so that they can dominate others. So the already hegemon states, already dominant state, already powerful states, when they see that any other state is rising and any other state is coming in competition with them, so they try their best to prevent the rise of that state in order to preserve their own dominance. And again, states are always conscious about power, states are always conscious about balance of power, they need equal power. Neo-Realism also talks about systematic distribution of power. By systematic distribution of power, we mean the distribution of power between the states. In this present time period, we have unipolarity. By term unipolarity, we means that the power is in the hand of only one state. Like now, the power is in the hand of United States. It is the sole only great power in the world. Prior to it, we had bipolarity. The power was in the hand of USSR and US. So there were two big, huge, great powers. And by multipolarity, we mean that power is shared by many states. Like we had France, Germany, US, USSR, and Great Britain. They all were power, and they all were sharing power, and there was balance of power. So these are some types of distribution of power actually. And there is an extra information. Waltz actually argue, or he was of the view, it was his personal view, that the most stable arrangement was bipolarity. He was satisfied with two powers. So here our lecture ends, and at the end I have a question for you. China is a rising power in Asia, and how many of you believe or think that China is going to become a superpower in the near future? Or will US, the already existing superpower, would be able to counter the rise of China in Asia or not? Share your thoughts in the comment box with your name so that I can share your thoughts in the next video.